Good Thursday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for April the 13th. Today, we are reading together in Numbers chapter 5. Numbers chapter 5 is going to give us some instruction concerning sin and uncleanness in the camp and how those issues can be addressed. Again, thanks so much for tuning in today. Let me get the text of Numbers chapter 5 up on the screen for us so we can read along together here in Numbers chapter 5, beginning in verse number 1. Yahweh instructed Moses, command the Israelites to send away anyone from the camp who is affiliated or who is afflicted with a skin disease, anyone who has a discharge, or anyone who is defiled because of a corpse. Send away both male and female. Send them outside the camp so that they will not defile their camps where I dwell among them. The Israelites did this, sending them outside the camp. The Israelites did as Yahweh instructed Moses. Yahweh spoke to Moses, tell the Israelites, when a man or woman commits any sin against another, that person acts unfaithfully toward Yahweh and is guilty. The person is to confess the sin he has committed. He is to pay full compensation, add a fifth of its value to it, and give it to the individual he has wronged. But if that individual has no relative to receive compensation, the compensation goes to Yahweh for the priest, along with the atonement ram for which the priest will make atonement for the guilty person. Every holy contribution the Israelites present to the priest will be his. Each one's holy contribution is his to give. What each one gives to the priest will be his. Yahweh spoke to Moses, verse number 11 of Numbers chapter 5. Speak to the Israelites and tell them, if any man's wife goes astray, is unfaithful to him, and sleeps with another, but it is concealed from her husband, and she is undetected, even though she has defiled herself, since there is no witness against her, and she wasn't caught in the act. And if a feeling of jealousy comes over the husband, or you might read there as well, another appropriate understanding of it is if a feeling of suspicion comes over the husband, and he becomes jealous or suspicious because of his wife who has defiled herself, or if a feeling of jealousy comes over him and he becomes jealous of her becomes jealous of her though she is not defiled, then the man is to bring his wife to the priest. He is also to bring an offering for her of 2 quarts of barley flour. He is not to pour oil over it or put frankincense on it, because it is a grain offering of jealousy, a grain offering for remembrance to draw attention to guilt. The priest is to bring her forward and have her stand before Yahweh. Then the priest is to take holy water in a clay bowl, take some of the dust from the tabernacle floor, and put it in the water. After the priest has the woman stand before Yahweh, he is to let down her hair and place in her hands the grain offering for remembrance, which is the grain offering of jealousy. The priest is to hold the bitter water that brings a curse. The priest will require the woman to take an oath and will say to her, if no man has slept with you, if you have not gone astray and become defiled while under your husband's authority, be unaffected by this bitter water that brings a curse. But if you have gone astray while under your husband's authority, if you have defiled yourself and a man other than your husband has slept with you, at this point the priest will make the woman take the oath with the sworn curse, and he is to say to her, may Yahweh make you an object of your people's cursing and swearing when he makes your womb shrivel and your belly swell. May this water that brings a curse into your stomach, causing your belly to swell and your womb to shrivel. And the woman will reply, amen, amen. The priest is to write these curses on a scroll and wash them off into the bitter water. He will require the woman to drink the bitter water that brings a curse, and it will enter her to cause bitter suffering. The priest is to take the grain offering of jealousy from the woman, present the offering before Yahweh, and bring it to the altar. The priest is to take a handful of the grain offering as a memorial portion and burn it on the altar. Afterward, he will require the woman to drink the water. When he makes her drink the water, if she has defiled herself and has been unfaithful to her husband, the water that brings a curse will enter her to cause bitter suffering. Her belly will swell and her womb will shrivel. She will become a curse among her people. But if the woman has not defiled herself and is pure, she'll be unaffected and will be able to conceive children. This is the law regarding jealousy. When a wife goes astray and defiles herself under her husband's authority, or when a feeling of jealousy comes over a husband and he becomes jealous of his wife, he is to have the woman stand before Yahweh, and the priest will carry out all these instructions for her. The husband will be free of guilt, but that woman will bear her iniquity. And that is Numbers chapter 5. All righty, here in Numbers chapter 5, we are dealing with, again, sin and uncleanness within the camp. Here within Numbers, remember, we are, I believe we recall correctly, we're 50 days. Chapters 1 through 10 cover the span of about 50 days as censuses are taking place, as there are logistical and organizational instructions being given. Also here in chapter 5, we have these issues concerning, again, sin and uncleanness within the camp. Because, again, the whole premise of everything that's taking place here is to recognize Yahweh's presence in this camp, Yahweh's presence among his people. And in order for that presence to continue on, in order for the fellowship to continue, the people had to be pure. They could not be defiled. They could not be a people overcome with sin. If these things happened, they had to be addressed. So here within chapter 5, we have the need for avoiding that which would prevent Yahweh from being among the people. In verses 1 through 4, specifically, we're talking about matters of uncleanness, the ritual uncleanness, whether we're talking about skin diseases, bodily discharges, or being defiled by a corpse. If that happened, if that was the condition of a particular person, the text says they are to be put out of the camp. Now, that does not mean that they are expelled from the camp, never to return again. That's not what's under consideration here. What is under consideration here is a temporary removal from the camp in order for them to go through the ritual purifications and cleansings that were available to them in Leviticus, and as are described in Leviticus chapter 13 and 14. So this was a temporary thing to where they would be put outside the camp. That way they are far from Yahweh's presence. They can address the issues, and then they can return once again once the purification has taken place. As well, beginning of verse number 5 and going through verse number 10. So verses 5 through 10 now deal not with ritual impurity, but with moral impurity, with sin that has taken place. I think what's being addressed here, probably most specifically, is the issues that would be covered by the guilt offerings that are described in Leviticus chapter 6. In Leviticus 4 through 6, we have a number of offerings that are taking place that are to be given to remedy certain issues that would be had among the people. I think in chapter 6, with the guilt offering specifically, that seems to be the issue that is under consideration here, that when there is any sin against another person, and in the way it's described here with the confession, the restitution, and the sacrifice, all that lines up a lot with the guilt offering, which guilt offerings were specifically applied to whenever there was a defrauding of someone, whenever someone was owed something, but that wasn't given to them, or something that belonged to somebody else was taken from them. Again, I think that's the issue under consideration here for the most part, although there might be other issues that could come in here as well. But I do want to note here the reality in verse number 5 that, again, when a man or woman commits any sin against another, against his neighbor or her neighbor, the person acts unfaithfully toward Yahweh and is guilty. So this shows here a very strong connection between how we treat others determines our standing before Yahweh. That sin against a person is a breaking of faith with Yahweh. We cannot say that we love Yahweh and yet not love our fellow man. That's a principle that's laid forth very strongly in the letter of First John in the New Testament. So when that happens, when there is some sort of sin that has been committed and people recognize that, they are to go and to confess that. They're to offer restitution for that, whatever has been defrauded or whatever has been cheated from someone. That plus a fifth is to be added back to the person. And then there's a sacrifice to be made. There's an atonement ram that is to be offered. But there's also the provision here that, say this happened sometime in the past and maybe that person no longer has any relatives, then that person would still need to atone for their sins by giving that price to the priesthood so that the Lord is receiving that. So whether we're talking about ritual sin or whether we're talking about moral sin, those things needed to be atoned for in order for the people to remain in fellowship with God and for his presence to remain with them within the setting of the camp. Now, what about with something as serious such as marital unfaithfulness? That's what's being addressed in beginning in verse 11 here in Numbers chapter 5. And let me just go and throw in this reminder that whenever we're reading this text, we don't need to read it with our 21st century Western eyes. Their culture is not our culture. Things just simply were different back then. And that is the blueprint with which they're working, the cultural lenses with which they're working, because there are a number of things that are mentioned, or I should say not mentioned here in chapter 5 and verses 11 through the end of the chapter, verse 31, I believe, that there are a lot of questions that are just unanswered. Things that we might have questions about are not addressed here in the text. And we just have to recognize that and live with that and deal with that. Again, keep it in its cultural context. Here, the context is, if you have a woman who has been unfaithful to her husband and has given her body to another man, and the husband becomes jealous, or again, I really like what one resource says. The idea here is suspicious. If a husband becomes suspicious that his wife has been unfaithful, there's been no tangible evidence of it, you might say. He did not see the act of unfaithfulness, the act of adultery, but he is suspicious of it. Maybe there's some reason for which he is suspicious of it. If that happens, then he has the ability. He's not demanded to do this, but he is allowed to take her before the priest and to go through this particular ritual where they would come before the priest. He would bring an offering for her that would allow her to be presented before Yahweh. Her hair would be let down. The priest would take water in a clay bowl. He would take some dust from the tabernacle floor. This is very interesting. And he would put that in the water. He would mix it together. And then he would make her take an oath. And the oath basically is this, that if you have not slept with another man, if you've not been unfaithful, then after you drink this water, you're going to be fine. Nothing's going to happen to you. But if you have done something, because remember, right now, it's just a suspicion on behalf of the husband. He really has no clear evidence to support this suspicion, or and the men and the people in this situation cannot make an absolute determination on the issue itself. Well, what they're doing here is they're appealing to Yahweh in order to make the proper decision here. There's no hocus pocus going on here. This isn't witchcraft or anything of that nature. This is Yahweh seemingly directly intervening into the situation. So again, if she's innocent, then nothing's going to happen. It'll just be this weird water that you have drunk. But if you have defiled yourself with another man, then this water is going to bring a curse upon you. It's going to be bitter water. And that should take our minds to the water of Mara. That is something that should echo here within this text for us. And if you have done what is wrong, then the text says that may Yahweh make you an object of your people's cursing and swearing when he makes your womb shrivel and your belly swell. Makes your womb shrivel and your belly swell. Other translations talk about the thigh, but the thigh is often in ancient Near Eastern writing is often used as a euphemism for the private parts, for the genital regions of both males and females. So whenever it talks about the thigh falling, the idea here is that there is going to be an effect on the reproductive organs of this woman. Your belly is going to swell, showing that that's the thing that you're going to see that's going to show that this is an issue. So the thought behind this is if she has been unfaithful, she might be pregnant. She might be pregnant by this other man. And if there is no showing of that pregnancy yet, then this is going to reveal what has taken place. As some think then what is happening here is that this is going to cause that pregnancy to fail, that this is going to cause a miscarriage. Others think that what's being described here is the simple inability to be able to reproduce, to have children from this point forward. Now, thinking back in other texts, the punishment for adultery is death. But it seems, again, that that's applied whenever there is the individuals being caught in the act, that you know that this 100% is taking place. What we're working on here is just the suspicion of the husband that this is taking place. And you might think, well, she just can't have children. Guess she got off the hook, right? Well, except for the fact that in this culture, to not have children as a woman was basically worse than a death sentence. There was a tremendous amount of shame and dishonor that would be heaped upon a woman who was unable to have children. And that's the punishment that fits the crime here within this particular instance. So the woman agrees to this. She's going to have the grain offering in her hands, going to present it as an offering to Yahweh, bring it to the altar. The priest is to take the handful of grain offering as a memorial portion and burn it on the altar. Afterward, he will require the woman to drink the water. So once she does that, if she has defiled herself, if she is guilty of this unfaithfulness, then it will enter her, and it will be bitter, and it will cause her suffering. Again, her belly will swell, and her womb will shrivel, and she will become a curse among her people. But if she's innocent, then nothing's going to happen. And we're going to know, again, this is a divine judgment given by Yahweh. He knows exactly what took place. He would make the absolute correct judgment, the accurate judgment here in this moment. So verses 29 through 31 just gives basically a summation of this previous text. I ain't gonna lie, this is weird. I mean, this is strange. This is, I think, very unlike much of what we read about in the Pentateuch, in the Torah portion of the Old Testament. But another person made a good point that really this could be read. I do believe this is a literal instruction that was given, but for the purposes of kind of the theological message behind it, really this serves as a metaphor for Israel herself and her unfaithfulness toward Yahweh, which ties in really well with what we read back in Leviticus chapter 32 with the golden calf incident. I referenced that some time ago whenever reading through that text, Exodus 32 with the golden calf incident, where after all that went down, remember Moses took the golden calf, ground it up, put it in water, made people drink, and then the Levites went after that and started killing their neighbors who were guilty of this. And some think there's a connection between what happened there with that drinking of that water and the drinking of water here, just as here there was a sign that showed that the woman was guilty. So it's speculated that was also the case back in Leviticus 32, that those who were guilty of this transgression, this spiritual adultery against Yahweh in making the golden calf for themselves and worshiping it, that they would be tangibly seen as being guilty in that sense as well. So yes, what we're dealing with here in this chapter, just in general, again, chapter 5 is dealing with sin, dealing with uncleanness, making sure that everyone was pure and holy and sanctified before Yahweh in the camp, so that Yahweh's presence itself could dwell in the camp. If you have any questions, I wouldn't be surprised if you do. Please feel free to leave those in the comment section below, and I'll be happy to have that discussion with you, give you an answer as best I can. I appreciate you tuning in for this reading today. Hope you tune in tomorrow as we read together from Numbers chapter 6, which is going to detail the Nazirite vow. This is a good read because we're going to see some individuals later on in the text that are going to be those who have been given over to the Nazirite vow. We'll read about that tomorrow and learn a little bit more about this particular vow. And then we're going to read at the end of the chapter really one of my favorite sections of scripture. I really love and appreciate the blessing that is given by Aaron towards the people that we're going to read at the end of the chapter tomorrow. So I hope you'll tune in then as we read that together tomorrow. Again, thanks for tuning in today. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. We'll be back at it tomorrow. Take care and God bless.